Hello everyone! Today we're going to be jumping back into Standard and taking a look at some of the new skeleton synergies that we have from the latest set in Standard. Now deck list is down in the description as always if you just want to quickly copy the deck and start getting into some games, but let me go ahead and talk through some of our inclusions. Cult's Conscript here is a 1 mana 2/1 skeleton. It does enter the battlefield tap, but this is a fine turn 1 play. Additionally, we can get some additional value here, paying 1 and a black to return it to the battlefield from our graveyard, but we can only activate this if a non-skeleton creature died this turn, and we only have one of those in this deck. 2 copies of Duress, which we'll talk about why in a little bit, and then the new Forsaken Miner. This is a 1 mana 2/2. It can't block, but we don't really care about that. We do have a very aggressive game plan, and then whenever we commit a crime, we can pay 1, and if we do, return this from the graveyard to the battlefield. Now, Duress will count as one of our crimes, and will also help to eliminate our opponent's board wipes, since board wipes are the bane of this deck. Next up, we've got Tiny Bones the Pickpocket, another new skeleton here, running 3 copies here because he's legendary and we don't want to be flooded, and when he deals combat damage to a player, we can cast a non-land permanent card from their graveyard, and then we can use mana of any type to cast that, which is good because we're playing a mono black deck. Now next up we have Case of the Stash Skeletons. This for 2 mana gives us a 2/1 suspected skeleton, which will give us that menace there, but it can't block. And then if we do eventually lose that skeleton, we can use this to search our library for a card and put it into our hand, which is a great way to close out the game. Next up, we have some removal spells, so Go for the Throat and Long Goodbye, both to help us deal with our opponent's early game creatures and get rid of some key blockers, maybe things with lifelink so we can keep the aggro on. And of course, we can use both of these to commit that crime and get our Forsaken Miner back. Now, next up, we do have Corpses of the Lost. This is the all-star card in this deck. Gives skeletons we control +1/+0 and haste. And we also get to create a 2/2 black skeleton pirate creature token. So right off the bat, this is 3 mana for a 3/2 skeleton with haste that makes all of our other skeletons better. Now, additionally, at the beginning of our end step, if we descended this turn, we can pay 1 life and return Corpses of the Lost to our hand, which is a great way to get more bodies onto the battlefield if need be. Now, Hunted Bone Brute is a all-star in this deck. It is a 3 mana 6/2, and it has Menace, making it very difficult to block. But if we do cast it outright, we have the downside of our opponent creating 2 1/1 White Dog creature tokens. Additionally, when the Hunted Bone Brute dies, we can have our opponent lose 3 life, which is perfect. But what we're really trying to do here is play this disguised for 3 mana as a 2/2, protect it for a turn, and then as a little bit of a combat trip, go ahead and flip this guy to get in some extra damage, because that 6 damage is going to make a big difference for us. 2 copies of VN so we can commit some more crimes, and it also acts as exile removal and deals with the really pesky threats in our opponent's deck, and potentially planeswalkers if they become problematic. And then, of course, we have Gisa the Hellraiser here. 5 mana at the top end of our deck. Ward, pay 2, and then also pay 2 life, so very difficult to remove. And skeletons and zombies we control are going to get +1/+1, so this Anthem is going to be a great way to make our board even better. Additionally, whenever we commit a crime, we create 2 tapped 2/2 blue-black zombie rogue creature tokens. This can only happen once each turn, but this is a great way to kind of fill up our board if we're ending up into one of those longer matchups where things start to become a little bit more difficult. Now we've got 23 swamps and Takanuma, so a very straightforward land base. Now, if you guys have been enjoying my content, make sure you subscribe to the channel to stay up to date on my latest videos, and if you do enjoy this video, make sure you give it a like. Let's go ahead and see how this deck does. Alright, opponent going first, and this looks like a good enough starting hand to keep. So I think I'll go ahead and keep that. Right off the bat, we're going to want to start with the Cult Conscript, since it has the greater power. This sets us up. Now, turn 2, we can either play the Case, or we can use one of our removal spells to make sure we're getting some damage on our opponent. One more land would be perfect, so we can go ahead and play out the Bone Brute in its disguise. Now it looks like our opponent could also be playing a mono black deck. I guess they're thinking about potentially using a removal spell here, but we'll see. If they play Case of the Stash Skeleton, that could be fun if it's a Skeleton Mirror. We're just gonna play this out now. It doesn't particularly matter. Get our 2 damage. If we wanted to play that a little bit more cleanly, we should have attacked first. Next turn, we've got 4 damage on board. I think we're gonna go for the Bone Brute, but we have a couple of other options. We can also go Tiny Bones with one of our removal spells. Now, there does exist a niche case in this deck when we're near the late game, where we'll actually want to use a removal spell on our own skeleton so we can search our library with the case. We're not there yet, of course, but it is worth bringing up that that is one particular line that we can go through. Now, I am a little concerned with how long our opponent's taking with their turns. I'm not seeing any early game plays, so there is potential for them to be running like a board wipe control style deck. Alright, Darkslick Shores. So our opponent does have access to blue. Okay, so it's just it's a toxic deck, that's fine. Do I want to remove this now? I honestly think I do. We're gonna use Go for the Throat because they don't have the blue up for a counterspell. Tiny Bones here. And everything's looking good. Now, if we connect with Tiny Bones, we could potentially steal their guy here. Okay, poison counter. I mean, Corpses of the Lost is just worth it here. This is so much better. Opponent's down at 1. Alright, we'll decline there. So now things are looking really good for us. And honestly, with haste, we can start playing out these Bone Brutes without even having to disguise them. Keep in mind, if the Bone Brute dies, our opponent will lose 3 life. Okay. And we've got it. Alright. Alright, so it looks like we've got our opponent going first here. I like seeing Corpses of the Lost, but we don't have much of an early game aside from that. I think we'll take the mulligan here. Keep 6. I'm gonna get rid of Tiny Bones. I think Forsaken Miner is gonna be better early. Corpses of the Lost is good. If our opponent plays out a creature and we can remove it with Long Goodbye, I feel pretty okay about that. So we're gonna hold up Long Goodbye. Hopefully our opponent plays something and we'll just remove it. Gotcha. I mean, we're just gonna remove that. They're playing a skeleton deck. We're not gonna let them get out of control. We have the drop on them as well. Alright, so clear advantage. If we can keep finding lands, eventually we'll be able to play Gisa. Sure. Yep, that's not gonna be worth it for them. One more land would be perfect for us for our next turn. And we've got the game. Alright, going first here. This is a little bit risky here, but if we find one more land, we're gonna be in a great spot. We're gonna start just playing out Tiny Bones. Alright, well, we find something for turn 2. If they have a removal spell, they'll use it. If they have a counter spell, they can spell pierce. But Otherworldly Gaze is fine. Honestly, putting things in the graveyard for Tiny Bones has me pretty happy. Oh, I did not attack there. Definitely a mistake, but that's okay. I do want to find one more land, and we do. Let's go Corpses of the Lost. If there's a counterspell, now would be the time for our opponent to use it. Yep. Swing out. We do have 2 Bone Brutes. Both are going to be pretty good. I want to keep finding land drops so we can get up closer to Gisa. Alright, play you. Swing out with both. Very nice. Now, Tiny Bones only works for permanents. Temp Lockdown is not great for us. I think we'll just play this out face down. End of our opponent's turn, depending on what happens, we can flip this. And then we'll play Gisa next turn. Alright, we're still gonna turn this face up. Our opponent's gonna lose 3 life. Alright, so land Gisa. We'll use one of our nice free map tokens, and I'm actually fine with case of the stashed skeleton here. Let's go ahead and use this real quick. We just find a land. Swing out for 5. Play the case. Okay. That's fine. I guess they just wanted that in their graveyard for some extra damage on the Jhin. Alright, well, this is exactly what we needed to draw here. Looking good, swinging out like this. Menace makes these unblockable. Unless our opponent has a spell, which they do not, and that's a good game. Alright, opponent going first. This is fine. We don't have the turn 1 play. We might draw it. But we don't, so we're playing a little bit slower into a red deck here. So I think this is another aggro deck we're playing against, potentially. They're off to a slow start though, so we're going to play Case of the Stashed Skeleton. Potential for a removal spell here. I'd be fine with that. Next turn, I think we go Corpses of the Lost. Yep, squeeze. I'm actually not too concerned about Squee, because we outpace. They deal 3 damage, we've got 6 here. I do think our deck is faster. Alright. Yeah. This deck is playing really slow for mono red. Yep. We're gonna continue to outpace here. So I think we play this. We don't want to give our opponent more 1/1s. So we'll just go like that. Opponent's down at 9. We do potentially have lethal next turn, depending on what our opponent does. Flipping this guy over. If we find another land, we can make a case. Sure. leaving Squee back is interesting. I honestly think I just kill the Squee here and swing for 5. Yeah, can't cast it. End the turn. We're holding up Long Goodbye. Alright. No red mana for our opponent, so we'll just kill Squee before they get the 1/1. And honestly, I'm just gonna play out the Bone Brute. We'll give them 2 1/1s. But we're still in a really strong spot. We'll swing out. I think best blocks are here and... yeah. This has Menace, so they need to double block. If they double block here, yep, they'll lose 3. They can't block here. This should be lethal. Yep. Perfect. And then there's the 3. Doesn't matter. And we've got it. Alright, going first, we'll keep. Who could say no to a bunch of Bone Brutes? Forsaken Miner is going to be better than the Cult Conscript, just because that extra health. We'll play the Conscript here. Swing out with the Miner. We'll go ahead, play this. Maybe we draw a counterspell? Yep. That's fine. Just swing out. We're going for a very aggressive playstyle here. We can Long Goodbye, get it back next turn. That's not terrible. And it looks like our opponent missed a land drop. So let's just get rid of that. Pay 1, get him back. Swing for 2. Okay, they find their land. Augury, sure. Alright, so let's go ahead, disguise our Bone Brute. Swing out for 4. Now we have lethal on board. That's fine. I mean, we'll just sack that. Yep. And we've got it. Alright, everyone, I hope you enjoyed. So this is a really strong aggro deck that's capable of outpacing a bunch of other decks, as well as doing a decent job in a Skeleton Mirror matchup. Now, I will say, definitely be cautious of opposing decks that are running a lot of board wipes. This is why we have 2 copies of Duress, but a board wipe will seriously inhibit our game plan, so we do want to be playing for a rather aggressive early game. Try not to be too greedy either, since that early game setup is necessary for being able to close out the games quicker. Corpses of the Lost is probably one of the best cards in this deck, so if you have it in your hand, you're looking pretty good. And then Hunted Bone Brute is really powerful. I would recommend playing it disguised as to not give your opponent those dog tokens, unless, of course, you have something like the ability to give it haste off of Corpses of the Lost, and then you're playing towards that lose 3 life for 3 mana, which is still pretty okay in the mid game, especially since you're forcing those blocks. Aside from that, don't feel too bad about playing fairly aggressively with your removal spells. You do want to keep your opponent's board nice and clear so you can keep on hitting in, getting more damage over the course of the game. And then Gisa in the late game is pretty much our only out if we are in a longer matchup, but she is a great way of closing out the game as well, since when we're using our removal spells, we get those extra tapped zombies, which is going to be pretty good for us. So yeah, that's my deck. I hope you all enjoyed. If you do have any ideas for another deck that you'd like to see me play, why don't you let me know in a comment down below. We've got a whole bunch of new cards, and I am going to be trying to do a bunch of different decks with those. And then if you did enjoy this video, make sure you give it a like. I'll see you all next time.